welcome to Being Brainy, brought to you by Brain Research New Zealand. My name's Bronwen and I'm a neuroscientist, or in other words, I'm a brain scientist. And what I do for my job is to study how the brain works and if something goes wrong, whether we can try and fix it. Now what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about different types of brain cells that you have in your brain and also how they talk to each other. And then we're going to do a really cool experiment at the end. Now, in order to do this, what you're going to need is some paper, a pencil or a pen. And then to do the experiment, you need a plastic cup or a glass, and then a very small object, such as a button or a piece of Lego or a marble, but anything that you can drop into the cup or the glass. So for example, I've got my red cup here that I'm going to use, okay, and I've got a little blue stone that I'm going to be dropping into the cup, okay. Okay, so let's talk about the different cells that make up your brain. So the first ones we're going to talk about are the neurons. And these are your main communicating cells. And you have different types of neurons in your brain. And they can either receive messages from your body or they can send messages to your body. And so here we have a picture, beautiful picture of a neuron that's found in the brain. Really beautiful, elegant neuron. The other type of cell that you have in your brain is something that's known as an astrocyte. And these look a bit like stars. So here's an astrocyte here. Looks a little bit like a star or a sun. And these cells don't send messages like neurons, but they're still really important because they support the neurons by giving them food and making sure the neuron is healthy so that the neuron can work properly and maintain its ability to send communication and signals. One of the other types of cells that we have is called an oligodendrocyte, which is a really weird name. And these also don't send messages. And these are these really hairy looking cells, okay? A bit crazy hair going on here. But they've got a really important job. And their job is to make a protective coating around the part of the neuron that's known as the axon. So it's a bit like if you think about a piece of electrical wire that runs through your house, and a lot of those pieces of electrical wire have plastic wrapped around them. Well, the oligodendrocytes make that plastic wrapping, but they make it in a protein called myelin, and they wrap around the axon to make sure that the signal that the neurons send goes in the right direction and goes as fast as possible. And then the final cell type that we have in the brain is the microglia. And here's a beautiful picture of a microglia. And these are support cells. They're actually cells from your immune system or immune cells. And we think about these as the policemen of the brain. So they go around and they make sure that everything's okay in the brain. And if there's any disease or damage or any foreign objects or such as a virus or a bacteria, they will go and they will destroy it by eating it up. Now, what I want you to do with your piece of paper and your pen or your pencil is I want you to draw your own neuron. And it's going to be a dancing alien neuron, okay? And so if you get your piece of paper and your pencil, the first thing we're going to do is you're going to draw a nice round circle, which is going to be the face of the neuron, okay? And it's going to have one eye in the middle here, all right? So the circle is what we call the cell body or the main part of the neuron, okay? So that's where all the information is. And the nucleus here, or the eye, which we call the nucleus, that's where the DNA and all the information gets stored. Then what I want you to do on the face of your neuron is to draw some really wiggly squiggly hair, okay? And this hair is what we call the dendrites, and they're a bit like arms sticking out the top of the head, okay? So if you want to, you can draw them a bit like arms, or you can draw them like really wiggly hair. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the head and we're going to draw a really long wiggly body going down like this. And it's going to have two legs and lots of little feet at the bottom here. Now this long body here is the axon, okay? And that's where all the information gets sent down from the center of, from the cell body all the way down the axon here. And then at the bottom here, these little wiggly feet are what we call the axon terminals. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to dress your dancing alien neuron up in a crazy outfit, crazy clothes, okay? And that's the wrapping around the outside, the clothes around the outside. That's that myelin that we talked about the oligodendrocytes making, okay? And then put on these labels that I've put here, okay? So dendrites at the top, the crazy hair, the nucleus in the center, which is your eye, the cell body, which is the face, the axon, which is the long body stretching down here, and the axon terminals, which is the leg and the many feet down the bottom. And then your myelin sheath, which is the clothing that wraps around. Okay, so here's one that I did a little while ago. Does your neuron alien look a bit like this? This is my neuron alien. Okay, so here's her dendrite here, and the nucleus and the cell body, and there's the axon, and it's all wrapped up in this myelin sheath with the axon terminals going down here. So you can make you can make your neuron alien look as crazy as you like. You can draw lots of them if you want. So have some fun with that. Now we're going to talk about how neurons talk to each other. And they do a really special thing when they talk to each other, and that is they make electricity. So if we think up, we're going to start at the top here, and these little red circles I've got here are little chemical signals that is being sent. So imagine there's another neuron up here, okay, and so its feet would be dangling down here, and from its toes, if we have a look at the toe, from its toes and its feet, it's sending out these little chemical signals. And the chemical signals on this neuron, they get captured by the dendrites, those crazy arm or hair that's coming out of the cell body. And they take up the chemicals and they take it up and put it into the cell body. And the cell body, which is where all the information is, and the DNA and the nucleus, it reads that chemical signal and it knows what message to send, okay? So it can go, right, okay, so that's a go signal. That chemical tells me to go. And I'm going to send a signal down to my friend who's living down here at my toes, and I'm going to tell him to go as well. And so what they do is they take that chemical signal and they turn it into electricity. And what goes down the axon, this long body axon, is an electrical signal. So it goes shooting down, out through the feet, and what it does is it gets the feet to release another chemical signal, okay? Might be the same chemical signal as the one that came, that the neuron caught, or it might be a different signal. So it might get a go signal, but the electrical activity and the chemical it releases might be a stop signal. Just depends on what type of neuron it is and what message it's wanting to send. Okay, so starts off with a chemical signal, it gets taken up into the cell body, and it gets turned into an electrical signal that goes all the way down the axon. It then releases more chemical signal for the next neuron to pick up. And this electrical message or this electrical activity is called an action potential. And it's the action potential that comes down and sends the message. And action potentials are really, really important. And they can travel at really high speeds. So when you have a neuron that has myelin wrapped around it, so that clothing that we talked about, the speed of the action potential or the electrical signal can travel at over 300 kilometers an hour, which is really fast, way faster than you can drive in your car. So when two axons, when the toes of two of these neurons meet, okay, so the toes here meet the dendrites up here and they're passing the electrical signal on, it's what we call a synapse, okay? So sending the chemical signal between the two neurons is what we call a synapse. Right, so keep in mind the speed of which that electrical signal goes. And the reason why I want you to think about that is because the next experiment we're going to do is all about how fast your brain reacts. So if your action potential or the electrical signal travels at over 300 kilometers an hour, you can imagine that allows your body to respond really quickly to stuff. So a really good example is if you're going into the kitchen and you accidentally put your hand on the top of the stove and it's really hot. Now think about what you do. Do you stand there with your hand on the top of the stove going, oh, that feels hot. I think I should move my hand. Or do you suddenly go, oh, that's really hot, and really quickly pull your hand away? Now think about what has had to happen for you to pull your hand away quickly. The hand, or the heat sensors in your hand, basically have to feel that hot temperature. And they then need to send a message by axons, neurons and axons, down your arm to your spinal cord, up into your brain, to the part of your brain that senses the sensation of heat. Those neurons then go across and they tell neurons in the area of your brain that controls movement, quick, we've got to move really fast. Those neurons then send a signal of move down your spinal cord, back down your arm to your hand and jerks it away. And think about how fast that all happens. Usually it's a reflex, isn't it? You just suddenly jerk your hand away. You don't even think about doing it. So that's how fast all that information is traveling through your body to your brain and back out again. And so we're going to think about this, and we're going to think about how fast your brain can actually respond, but also the other thing we're going to think about is that once your brain has responded, can it actually stop that message? Okay, so if your brain has told you to move your hand and you suddenly decide you want to stop moving your hand, how quickly can you do that? Or is there a time point at which you can't stop your hand from doing what your brain has told it to? And so what we're going to do now is we're going to do what we call the jelly bean test, okay? So this is where you need your cup or glass and your object that you're going to drop into it. And if you're really lucky, you might have got mum or dad to get you a jelly bean or an M&M, because we usually, if we go into the classrooms at school, we bring in bags of jelly beans and people get to use jelly beans to do this. But it doesn't matter what you're using to drop into the cup, it works. So we're going to go through this and you're going to see just how good you are at stopping your brain from doing something. Okay, so here are the instructions. Going to drop your jelly bean or your object, whatever it is that you've got, your piece of Lego or your button, you're going to drop it when the clock arm reaches the target arrow at 8. Okay, so in a minute I'm going to show you the picture of a clock and the clock arm is going to move, and when it gets to the number 8, you're going to drop your object into the cup. Easy. Now, if the clock arm stops before it reaches the number 8, you don't drop your object. Okay? Again, seems easy, doesn't it? Right. So this is what the clock looks like. Okay, so remember, when it gets to here, we're going to drop our object into the cup. If it stops before here, we don't drop the object. Okay, so I'm just going to show you what the clock looks like. It goes around like that, okay? Right, so you've got your cup and put your cup on the table or on the ground in front of you and pick up your object, and we're going to have a practice. Okay, so are you ready? Go. Right, so you should have dropped your object into your cup because it stopped at 8. Right, we'll have another practice. Let's go. Brilliant. Okay, now it's the real thing. Here we go. Cool. Oh, okay. So it stopped at 4. So you shouldn't have dropped your jelly bean or your object in your hand. You should still have hold of it. Okay, here we go. Are you ready? Okay. Are you ready? Good. Are you ready? Oh, didn't stop at 8, it stopped at 6. So I'm hoping that most of you didn't drop your thing into the cup. Right, let's give it another go. Are you ready? Okay, are you ready? Oh, stop just before the 8. Now I imagine, and I can't see you obviously, but I imagine that most of you have dropped the object into the cup because you are so close to the number 8. And in fact, I'd probably say that 100% of you have dropped it into the cup because it's so close to the number 8. Okay? So what did we observe? Well, what we saw was that if the hand of the clock stopped at 4, or if it stopped at 6, you were able to hold on to the object and not drop it into the cup. Okay, so you were able to stop the signal from your brain and go, nope, don't drop it. But when the arm of the clock stopped really close to the 8, you couldn't help it. You just dropped the object. And that's because the message had already been sent from your brain down to your arm saying drop. Okay? And there's no way that you could stop that message once it had left your brain and started traveling down your arm. So think about times that you might have experienced this. You might be going to kick a ball and then suddenly deciding you weren't going to, but you just did it anyway because you couldn't stop yourself. Or riding a bike and suddenly needing to stop really quickly, but not being able to in time. Things like that. Think about times when the information has left your brain and you just can't stop doing something. So I hope you really enjoyed that experiment. It's one that we find that lots and lots of kids really love doing. Play it again, get your brothers and sisters, mum and dad, get a bunch of cups and objects and have a competition and see who can hold on to their object and not drop it into the cup for the longest. Right, hope you enjoyed yourself and we'll see you next time.